You may have the goal of playing at Newport Jazz Festival. Well, how are you going to get there? A very drunk woman wanted to sing on stage. Even in the United States, every region of the country has different tastes in music. And the only thing that was in the venue were piano legs. There's several tours that I've been very, very proud of booking. One of them was a tour that we did of symphonic orchestras with Herbie Hancock for his CD Gershwin's World. And this was complicated because we actually did a tour and we worked with several symphony orchestras, which necessitated rehearsals in between each show. So we had to be very careful about how we routed this show, or this tour rather. So I was very proud of how that tour went. It was a big success. I've also done a couple of tours that for artists who don't like to fly and been able to route them. I did one tour for Cassandra Wilson that she started in Vienna and ended in Lisbon, and there was not a single flight. I did the same thing for Nora Jones, where she did not like to fly, and we organized the tour such as she went in a circle and she didn't end up having to fly. So those kinds of things, I think, where I had to bring my knowledge of markets and geography together to basically deliver what the artist requested. I feel very proud of those tours. I think because I always enjoyed the business. And it's funny because most musicians don't like the business part of it. But for me as an entrepreneur, to figure out what my target market was and proactively create that and build on that was very satisfying to me. I like that more than I did performing, actually. Michael Brecker. I booked Michael Brecker at University of California, Bakersfield for their jazz festival.
That feel to book another artist?
Oh, it was so much money. I was like so excited to book something that was, 4 digits, I think it was like $9,000 or something we got for him, which was very exciting. I started working, I used to work at Berkeley. And when I left, my last job at Berkeley was I worked for the performance division, and I set up the residencies and the clinics for the performance department. And I happened to talk to a guy who was just starting an agency. Again, it was Michael Brecker, because that was one of his first artists. And he was looking for someone to come and work for him. And at that time, I'd been at Berkeley for 7 years. And my band was working all the time. I was working basically 7 days a week. And I decided that I really wanted to work in the national industry. I thought it would be very, very interesting. So when I went to work at that time, it was called Scott's Other Talent, I finally had an opportunity to really understand how the national and international booking business works. And it was very, very interesting to me. Because in those days, we had a lot of radio. We had radio where you could go from one side of the country to the other side of the country and have radio stations that would play jazz music as well as clubs to play. And I think that model has changed quite a lot now. So it was very interesting. I think the biggest change that most people would say is the change in the recording industry. Because when I first started, the key thing was to get a manager, because a manager could get you a record deal, and then the record deal would help you put your recorded music out. They provided, the startup money to do your record. They provided the distribution and the creation of your product. They also provided publicity. They even did things like they would do ad buys where they would work with a local record store and they would both collaborate on doing advertisement for for the release. There were also in stores. People went into major markets and they did in store either interviews or sometimes they did little performances. So there's a lot more that just basically flowed from the record label. And that's really changed dramatically now. I think that most artists will benefit by having someone else negotiate for them because it's very hard to negotiate for yourself. I think as a musician, I felt I didn't want to lose the gig. So you have to figure out like, am I asking enough money? Am I asking too much money? Am I being too persistent? All those kinds of things. I think that most of the time an agency will not take you on unless you can also already demonstrate that you have a market and that they can actually make money by booking you. I can't make money if I'm booking door deals for people. So I think that it really, in this day and age, it's best for the artist to understand the industry first and to start to build their career first. And then an agent will be much more interested in taking you on and you'll be able to pay the agent.
That's the main thing you look for when you're evaluating whether to sign someone onto your roster.
Exactly. And there are a few exceptions to the rule when you come across somebody who's got a massive amount of talent, like Nora Jones or Esperanza Spalding or Samara Joy. These people that I've worked with, when they started their careers, it was so evident that they were really unique. And so I knew from the beginning, Richard Bona's another one, I knew from the beginning they'd be successful. Yeah, I think people have a tendency to look at big territories as one thing. And even in the United States, every region of the country has different tastes in music and different venues that you can approach. Europe in every single country is different. You can have somebody who is a huge success in Germany, but they don't even know who they are in Austria, and even they're a border country. Every continent, I could say, is very different. I think regional touring is important from a couple of different standpoints. First of all, when you start touring, most of the time you're not making a lot of money. So you really want to be in a place that you can drive to instead of flying. That's one thing. Also, if you focus on a region, it's easier to build an audience in a region and then satellite out beyond that region. You have a smaller area that you can focus on your marketing and trying to build your audience and then go from there and go to the next region, the adjacent region. So I think regional touring is a best use of money and also in terms of building audience. It's a lot easier to do it that way. I think one of the main tips that I want to give to people when they start out is to make a plan. You can always change the plan, but if you don't have a goal and you don't know where you're going, you won't be able to work strategically. And it's okay if it's difficult in the beginning, but you want every gig and everything you do to lead towards success. So we often talk about in the course about making a 6-month, 9-month, a year goal, maybe 5-year goal. I did this in my own career. When I was getting out of Berkeley, I said, I'm going to give myself 5 years. And in 5 years, if I can't support myself doing music, I'll go do something else. And that worked for me. And I think you may have the goal of playing at Newport Jazz Festival. Well, how are you going to get there? You have to build your profile so that you can be considered in a very competitive environment. So I think one of the biggest challenges for artists is the amount of time that you spent learning your instrument. You have to put the same effort into your career. And that's what we try to do with Anyone Can Book a Gig, is to try to give people the skills to be able to do this. But it takes a while. It takes a while. You're building a small business. So you have to really figure out your plan. I think that's very important. Oh, it's much easier to negotiate for other people. Plus, I was booking myself in a specific um, niche. I was booking myself to do events. That's primarily what my band did. We did events. We made alliances with the best hotels in Boston and had them recommend us for, Christmas parties and for events like that. I think working as booking people into concert hall situations, you need to have really good information about the market. You need to understand, like, what are all the factors involved in terms of publicity, in terms of profile, how are you going to use recorded music, record releases, and those kinds of things. How do you work with a publicist? There's so many different more factors that you have to take into account in doing that kind of thing. And that was very interesting to me. It was very interesting to me. In the agent artist relationship, the artist should expect that the agent can take advantage of an audience, but they can't create an audience. So your role is to bring forward the audience development by whatever means you can, through social media, through publicity, through, all the opportunities you have with the internet and all the social media sites. That's what you need to bring to the equation. And once we know what your audience is and where that audience is concentrated, the agent can take advantage of that, and they can help give you opportunities for live performance. If you don't have any recognition and you have no audience that's interested in seeing you, there's not a whole lot that an agent can do. That's by doing research, trying to figure out the places that play the same or present the same kind of music as them. I think that's a very important thing to do. I also think we did a part, taking it to the next level, we did a part in the video about negotiating. And negotiating is the hardest thing to really learn how to do well. I always say that I try not to sell people stuff. I try to ask people if what I do or the artists I represent fits what they already do. That way you're not selling somebody something, you're giving them what fits their business model. And I think that's a really important thing to do. Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of situations like that happened. One thing to this very day that I remember is being at an event, a corporate event, where a very drunk woman wanted to sing on stage. And we allowed her to do that, but it was so dreadful that I basically had the band take the tune out because I thought this woman is just making a fool of herself. And we got a lot of backlash for that. People said, no, she does this at every gig. You got to let her do this. And I felt so badly because I misread the situation. That's my own experience. I think there are definitely situations. One of the funniest things that I remember was booking one of our artists in a club in Spain, and they showed up for the sound check, and the only thing that was in the venue were piano legs. There was no piano, and the artist called me up. It was like, he was going to go on stage in like an hour and a half, and he said, "There's only legs here. What can I do with that?" Well, obviously they hadn't brought in the main part of the piano, and some people don't understand that in order to get a piano into a venue, usually a grand piano, you have to take the legs off. But I thought that was one of the most hilarious things ever.
Just
Right. Yeah, I think there's been a few disasters. I've had this one artist in particular who I will not name the name, but this person was convinced that the promoter's show budget was not right in terms of the rental situation, and spent a whole bunch of time in their hotel room before the gig calling equipment rental companies to check to check the numbers, and then would not go on stage, was holding the promoter hostage over these figures. And that was very difficult. And this particular promoter was a government employee. I mean, he wasn't even a regular promoter. This was a state-owned venue, and the government owned this venue. And he had a full house of people sitting in the auditorium, and the artist was backstage arguing with the promoter. And by the third or fourth call, this guy was nearly in tears because he didn't know what to do. He could not get this artist to go on stage. And eventually it got resolved because the artists realized they weren't going to get paid any money if they didn't go do the show. But there's been funny situations like that, I would say. That's one that sticks out of my mind.